guys, welcome back to another lesson from Arts Cool Media. Today we're going to be drawing the Puffin, and I'm going to show you how to set up our stencil system, and then we'll move on into the drawing. So if you'd like to take your stencil and place it in the middle of your page, and we're going to use these squares and diamonds in step 1. We're going to draw them in first. And then when we finish the elements in step 1, we'll draw in the squares, we'll line up the squares in step 2 and the diamonds in step 3. So we'll put a reference to the side for the time being, and I'm going to line up my step 1 a couple of inches down from the top of the page, so the puffin will be centered. I'm going to use a 2H pencil. And I'm going to lightly draw in my square and diamond. And make sure you hold down your stencil nice and firmly. Now we'll move on into the parts of the puffin. I've sped this up very slightly, so I'm not actually moving at this speed. So when you're doing this, just make sure you take your time, don't rush it, and get everything accurate and clean. So after step 1, you should be left with something like that. We'll move on to step 2 now. I'm going to line up my 2 squares, and then I'm going to draw in the eye, part of the neck, and one of the sections of the feet. And then I'm going to line up my 2 diamonds for step 3. And then just draw in these elements nice and lightly. And that's it. We'll take things into the drawing now. I'm going to start off with the eye. I'm just going to keep using my 2H pencil for this and start lightly sketching in the circular part of the eye. Now it doesn't fully take up the whole triangle. It's taken, you have a little bit of a space on the right hand side of the triangle and a little space at the top. So make sure the circle doesn't take up the whole eye. I'm just going to mark in this little section that comes off the beak. This little circular bit. And I just erased down my lines because I'm going to come back in there later with my coloured pencils. So we don't need our pencil lines to be too dark. So now you just see me lining up the line of the beak. I kind of came in from the eye and lined things up from there, just to make sure it was going in the same direction that the eye was pointing. And now we're just going to get these 2 triangular kind of shapes. These will be drawn in pencil, so we'll just sketch these in nice and lightly. I'm just marking in those 2 other parts then, and we'll come back with the red and the yellows and the oranges later. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit to give you guys a better view. So I've moved on to the black bar that goes across the puffin's neck. Now this is quite a dark shade or value, so we're going to do a couple of layers with this, or if you have a darker pencil you could use that. And I'm just going to give it, the bar doesn't have a, like, the edges aren't like just dead straight, they curve around and they have little kind of furry bits flicking out And just above the bar we've got just this other little shaded area below the beak. And this is a lot lighter in value or shade compared to our bar that wraps around. So I'm just going to lightly sketch that in with a few cross-hatched lines. And cross-hatched lines are just where you do a bunch of pencil strokes close to each other and they're going in the same direction. And then you can come back in again and do them in the opposite direction, and that will give you a cross-hatched effect. So now you see me using a mechanical pencil. This has a HB or 2B lead inside, so you can get the same effect with those pencils if you make sure they're nice and sharp. So the nice thing with a mechanical pencil is it's always sharp. So if you're looking to get into drawing, I recommend picking one up because they're very nice to use. So I just darkened up the eye a bit with the mechanical pencil, and now I've moved into the triangular sections of the beak. And we'll move on into the bar now. I'm just going to give it a wash going across. You see me now doing these cross hatch lines. It's going back and forth, being quite loose with it. Just give it that furry kind of texture. And popping little bits out on the edges, just to give it that randomness. So we have a darker bit at the top section and we have a darker bit at the bottom section, and then kind of towards the top side it's a little bit lighter, so just watch out for that. So you see me now building up the top section and the bottom section, working my way into the middle. And I'm just leaving the other part of the beak for now and just come back to that later. So I'll just organise this now. We'll start with the wing. So I'm just going to figure out, I've sketched in one part at the end and I'm just figuring out the different sections. Just drawing them in relation to one another is kind of how I work it. And just tidy that up with my pencil eraser. Again, I picked one of those up in an art shop in Dublin. Again, they're quite nice to use, so if you're going to get into this more seriously, definitely pick one up. So when you're doing the wings, just start off with a light line first, and when you're happy with those lines in the sketch, move in then and start shading things up. So I wasn't happy with a couple of those lines, so I erased them out with my pencil eraser. And then just at the top section here of the wing, it's very dark value, so just get that in there. And then when I'm doing these lines of the wing, I'm doing the lines in the direction the hairs are going. So this is another way, a nice way of doing the texture of the wings. So do your lines in the direction the hairs are going. I'm just going to go around it now with a bit of a heavier line. The wings are very dark. I don't normally give it a heavy line around the outside, but in this case we can do that. I'm going to mark in the darker parts first. So I'm happy with my sketch now, so we'll start building up these wings. And see how the right hand side is getting a shade, and I'm leaving a little white highlight along. We can come back in then later with a 2H pencil or a B pencil and just give that a light wash. And you see me doing the wash now. I'm just going to leave little flicks of white here and there to just give it more texture, more kind of furriness. And again, this is slightly time lapsed, so I'm not actually moving at this speed. So just make sure you take your time when you're doing this. There's no rush on it. If you want to pause the video at any time and just catch up, go ahead and do that. So you see me now just doing lots of flicks, and I'm doing the hairs in a downward direction for this part. Or the feathers even. So I've given most of the wing a wash now. So I can come back in again now and darken things up, make lines a little bit tighter. Just keep building up those layers. And I've picked up a 3B pencil now, just to add some darker parts. So I've done about 4 or 5 passes on this wing, so you know, if you're looking to get that level of realism, that's the kind of stuff you need to do. You need to keep doing it in passes. Start off light and work your way to dark. You know, I could keep pushing that wing further, but we'll move on to this wing for now. And again, I'm just going to sketch in. I'm going to work out where things go first. It's like working out a puzzle. You just got to figure out what pieces will make the rest of the puzzle easier to figure out. So I'm just sketching in this middle section now. Just doing very light flicks, and just give that light kind of effect that the feathers give. I also use a brush for sweeping away any little bits that get onto my paper. In the beginning, when I started off drawing, I tried to blow off the little bits, but little bits of water come out of your mouth and tend to ruin your drawing, so try not to do that. And if you use your hand, you can smudge the graphite as well, so a brush is nice to use because it doesn't do any of that. I've moved on down to the section of the feet. So I'm just continuing on now and building things up down the bottom near the feet. I'm just getting in those different sections. Just have this kind of darker part in the middle, just kind of below where one of the feet of the puffin is. So I'm just going to mark that in pencil. And I'm not going to go near the area where the colouring pencil is, because we can use that. We can use the red as a darker line, maybe a little bit of brown for that part. So you see me now doing this upper section of the puffin's wing. I've just kind of done lots of flicks you know, you don't have to be totally accurate with this part. You can, you know, make up the sections once they're all reasonably the same size. You can get away with doing that. And if you're happy with your sketched lines, then go back in and darken them up a little bit. And just keep building it up as you go. Make sure you get that darker section in at the top of the wing. It doesn't go, the darker section doesn't go all the way down to the puffin's body, it goes about halfway down and it starts halfway up the wing. Just take note of that. Now I've just extended these little feathers here. You see me erasing out some of those lines I had because they were a little bit too short, so I made them a little bit longer. I'm just continuing on my mechanical pencil and getting these excuse me, getting these little flicks of the feathers in. If you don't have one of these pencils, you can just use a you know, a very sharp HB or 2B or B pencil. It'll do the same job. But just make sure it's nice and sharp. And keep it that way while you're drawing. Don't let it run too soft. And I'm just giving a light wash along those top feathers there. And then they get lighter as they go towards the darker bar at the top. And then right at the puffin's body, this section's nice and dark. And if you're trying to figure out where the dark areas are, a nice little trick to do is to squint your eyes and the darker parts will stand out. So if you're trying to compare your drawing with the reference, squint your eyes and look at what stands out to you. This was something I learned in art school and it's very, very useful. I always use it. So I'm just doing a light wash along the puffin's body. Just this lower part we can see the feathery bits. And then there's a big white space in the middle, so we're not going to go near that. I'm just going to do these light lines around the edges. And I'm just being nice and rough and loose with these. Now, this eraser I'm using now is called a nettable eraser, or sorry, a netted eraser, and you can mold this to any shape you want, and it's not as harsh as a normal eraser, so it kind of takes the graphite away gently, so it's nice for blending out edges and stuff if they're a little bit too dark. So yeah, if you want to pick one up, it's called a netted eraser. Or they're called putty erasers as well, I think. But if you don't have one of them, just use a normal one and be very careful with it. So you see me now darkening up these upper sections of the wing. So I'm happy with my sketch. So I'm going to move in now with my 3B pencil and darken up these. I'm just touching up little bits near the puffin's body. It's at the bottom of the wing. So now I'm just going to give my wings a light wash like I did with the other wing, and I'm just going to leave little white spaces here and there to give it that feathery kind of feel. And I'm going to do another pass on these upper sections now. Darken things up once again until I get to 4 or 5 passes when I'm happy with things. So we'll leave it there and we'll move on to the Puffin's beak. I'm using one of my colouring pencils now. It's just a regular orange coloured pencil, and I'm just going to go in with this first and get my lines established. I'm using it quite lightly, and then I can come back in with my red and yellows and darken things up a little bit. You see me using a red coloured pencil now. Again, this is just a standard red. And I'm just going to establish those lines and build up the beak. I'm using a little bit of coloured pencil around the Puffin's eye, a little bit of red, a little bit of orange. Not being too harsh with it, very lightly. And now I've picked up my yellowed coloured pencil and just fill in those areas around the triangle sections. Once that's all kind of sketched in, you can move on down to the Puffin's feet. I've used my red coloured pencil first and I've sketched in that line nearer to the darker part, leaving the outer part of the foot for the lighter orange and yellows. So this part's just about, you know, looking very closely at your reference and looking at where the oranges and the reds are. And I'll just go around the outside of the foot now with my yellow and touch things up a little bit. So I've used a bit of yellow and a bit of orange for those lighter parts. You get that nice kind of mixed colour. I just came back in there with my mechanical pencil to touch things up a little bit. Just tighten up some of the edges with my pencil eraser. So at this stage of the drawing, we're just doing a little bit of detailing and touching up some areas. But that's more or less it now, guys. I'm just touching up some areas now. So once you have all that drawn in and you're happy with it, make sure you you erase out your squares and diamonds, and you then sign your name and date it, so you can keep track of your progress. If you do any more drawings, you can look back and see how you got on and compare yourself to now and back then. And just here you see me thinning the eye a little. The eye was a little bit too big, so I just thinned that out a little bit. So yeah, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope your drawing turned out nice. Alright, bye guys, thanks.